Joana Leite de Castro was born in Porto, the capital of the north of Portugal. A bright student throughout her school years, when the time came to pick a degree, like many of her peers, Joana elected business management. Her dream, she tells us, was to become the CEO of Coca-Cola or Google. After graduating with distinction, Joana got a job at a pharmaceutical company based in the US. She worked there for 3 years in the nutrition department. There, she flew the world in first class, meeting and interviewing doctors who were, more often than not, twice, if not triple, her age. Though in theory she was living the dream, Joana soon realized she was unfulfilled. She quit, packed her suitcase, and ventured to Africa to build a school from scratch with a friend. Throughout the following years, with the money she had saved in her corporate job, Joana traveled the world in search of something she couldn't quite yet put her finger on. After a less glamorous 3-month experience on a farm in Australia where, despite the beautiful surroundings, Joana found herself in a more depressive episode, she moved back to Porto and slowly but surely started a path towards becoming a yoga teacher. I met her already in the role of yogi, the dear Turkish friend I met in Spain, though curiously for most of our lives, Joana and I lived on the same street in Porto, not far from the yoga studio she now runs. Together we unpack her story of becoming, to discover insights or perhaps better questions to accompany us on our journey of living into maturity more wisely.
I'm fire. Okay, you have different elements. I'm fire. There's no doubt about it. This energy comes from that. But the fire can be used and be full as fighting or as light. And I guess that was the biggest change. Like if I had to summarize, the biggest change that I've done these many years, it's this fire and this energy that I have, instead of being for fighting and proving myself and having to control and being perfectionist, it became as light, as like, okay, I want to be of service, I need time for myself, I want to be present, not worrying too much about the future, accepting what comes, accepting that I'm imperfect, and trusting that every journey and that every part of my life led me to who I am right now and being here today, meeting you, like all of these things that are connected, and that connection is fascinating.
I'm Carlota Guedes, and this is the Waking Youth Podcast. I like to start my conversations grounding things in a little bit of personal history. And something that I've been doing recently is to feel into researching, both formally researching, but also informally from the conversations we have in the past, recalling those, and kind of feeling and thinking about terms that stand out when I think about you and the people that I interview. And so in your case, there were some. So I'm just going to throw these words at you and see where they land in you. And if you could talk a little bit about the ones that you feel inspired to in the context of your earlier background. So growing up, okay?
Okay. Wow.
Courage, energy, optimism, family, and last one, extroversion. And you can start wherever you want. The ones that call you the most, the ones that call you the least.
It's funny because when you come to a podcast, you imagine 2 questions. Who the hell are you? Or how would you introduce yourself? And what's your story? Probably the 2 most difficult questions to answer. And of course, those are the only 2 I kind of like thought about or prepared. And in a way, all of those words were present. And I didn't want it to be boring. And I know my life, I'm very thankful and grateful for that, is not boring at all. But it's a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of changes. And if you don't know anything about me, it can be a little bit overwhelming.
I'll give you an introduction.
Okay. But these words are good. So thank you. I guess I will start for extrovert and family. I think being an extrovert is something that came up very naturally for me and in a way easy. I've always been very talkative, and I come from a big family. I'm the eldest of 5. So not only was something natural in me, but also the family setting put me up in a lot of positions where I was the one that was the speaker. How do you say porta-voz?
Yeah, the
Like
speaker, the spokesperson.
Spokesperson
Exactly.
for my brothers, for my siblings, and for the family in general. And
I didn't know you were I didn't remember you were the
yeah,
older
I'm the
one.
eldest, and it's something that once you start reflecting about your childhood and your background, it's always one of the things that comes up first. So I think my extroversion came a lot from that as well. And the fact that I've always been very spontaneous and very easygoing. So I never really thought much about what I was saying and who I was speaking with. I remember when I was younger meaning like 3 or 4, I was walking around Avenida Brasil, like the beach avenue, with my family. And I went down to the beach, and then I came back, and my parents were there talking. My siblings were there, I think 2 of them, and my parents were talking with some other people, strangers. And I arrived there, and I kissed them all. Hi, 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 hi. And then I start speaking, and my mom looks at me, and she's like, we don't know them. They were just strangers passing by. And like, so yeah, it always came very natural for me. And I always thought, or I felt it as something that made me fun and approachable. And it only, like more recently, not even as a teenager, I think as a young adult, it brought me a lot into reflections about being too much or speaking too much, not listening.
When did you feel that?
Being too stressed, too anxious.
At what point?
Yeah. At what point did I feel this? I think it came more as like... because I was always also, and now I'm going to bring other words, very energetic and always moving and always in action. I never really stopped much to think or to reflect. And I don't come from a family that is very contemplative. So we've always been a lot like that, always into sports, always into movement. And we all speak a lot and loud because we have short time to speak. You have to speak a lot and be concise. So I don't know, I don't remember like a specific point in my life where that came up. But when I started, after I quit my job, I think while I was there, being so young and working at a big company with so many different cultures, everything was so surreal that it was easier to be me. I guess I was so different. I was the youngest. I was... probably the only it wasn't my first big job or my first job, and I think it was easier for me. I don't know, sometimes when things are way too
alien
alien or so unexpected, it's easier in a way. It's like, what do you have to lose? This is so surreal. I never really expected that I was going to be here. It's like you're just there.
Okay, but do you feel there you were more you?
Yeah. Which is
Compared
funny.
to
And then
Portugal.
I don't know if I was more me. I just remember that I was more conscious as an adult. So that was is the first milestone that I think. But once I start traveling and when I move around, and you ended up introducing yourself a lot. We come from a very small city and small, everyone knows each other. A lot of families know each other. So it's like, I don't really introduce myself or speak about myself. And when you start traveling and you're meeting different cultures and you're exposed to so many different things, I guess and I'm such a people person, and I'm so passionate about people's stories, and I want to hear everything, and so empathetic that when I was traveling, it was the first time where I was meeting people that didn't know anything about me. So I was explaining and trying to share these things, and a lot of times I would come home or wherever I was staying and feel like, oh my God, I spoke way too much, or I didn't listen, I don't remember what they say. So I don't know if it was because also a time of my life that I did a lot of reflection while traveling. You have so much time. But I would say that was the first thing that came up. Like, when did I realize that this extroversion, it's not always something amazing? Because I think also when you're growing up and you are an extrovert and a lot of your friends or family are not, sometimes there's a little bit of jealousy. So I guess maybe I was never, I don't know. I feel like I never saw it as a bad thing, or I never actually, if I'm being honest, like I always thought it was like a charisma, something that I had, and I stand it out. And also I was not so worried about, I mean, this is something that comes up when we are an adult, right? So worried about what other people think and your exposure and ego and all of that. So it's probably all connected. You are more, I don't know if it's freer, but it's like you're less attached to, so I guess that's also it. And then courage. So funny enough, I think I told you this, but courage is my word for this year. Did I tell you this? No.
I think you've mentioned.
When I was in India at the beginning of the year, it was something that came up a lot. And I grew up believing that courage means that you're not afraid.
Yeah.
And only recently, maybe last
Brene
5 years
Brown's
or so,
podcast.
probably. Brene Brown's podcasts, books, Netflix documentary, I mean, everything. I don't know if I told you this, but when I was teaching storytelling, did I tell you?
What?
All my exams, I hated I had to do exams for the students, but all the exams were about Brene Brown's YouTube talk, all of it. All the possibilities that I had of talking about vulnerability and courage, they were there. But yeah, I realized that being courageous mean you are brave because you are afraid.
Yeah.
And that changed completely the game. And I felt
you are brave because you are afraid, willing, and you go.
You are willing
exactly
to go because you are afraid. And I think making peace, realizing and even honoring that I'm a person that is afraid, it's something very recent and still scary, but it's easier these days. And so I don't know, I think I'm too harsh on myself, so it was difficult for me to see myself as someone courageous. And when you're living your life and you are making decisions and changing, being present with the moment and not thinking about what was before or what will be after, you are aligned with your values and you are deciding for yourself. I'm not saying it's easy. It is difficult and it takes me a lot of work. But it's like there's no other way.
Okay.
So it's like, I'm not courageous, I'm me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, you are yourself, but you are also courageous. Yeah. So accepting that, it was not easy. But yeah, it's true. And I think it's not only my word for this year, but it's been a lot in my... And sometimes you have to listen from other people, no? Other people have to, oh, Joana, you are so brave. You are so courageous. Oh, you did that. And I remember the big change, like leaving my corporate life and leaving this opportunity to work in a big company, have a career in the United States and all of that, and coming back, or I'm going to say coming back to whatever, to travel.
Let me interrupt you there, because I think that I know you, and we know a lot about each other's histories. And I think this will be even richer if we talk about the concrete examples or the concrete moments of your life that we're referring to. Because actually, I didn't know you back then when you were more into the corporate life and with that you were more business oriented. And I re-listened, I have to say, or I rewatched your TED Talk. And I was so surprised that you said that you used to want to be the CEO of Coca-Cola and Google.
I know.
Yeah, because I met you, you were already in this transformation. So I'm curious to explore, even knowing you, I'm sure that perhaps in a different way, but I'm curious to explore, you were excelling back then. You were on the top grades of your class. Like you were doing these speaking gigs, like you were doing a bunch of activities, consulting, you went to the US. So what was the driver there? And then what was the moment that something shifted? And that, and also in conversation with this courage.
No, it's funny because nowadays people that know me, like you do, or even later on, they don't see it. They cannot even picture like, oh no, I used to wear a suit and high heels. But if you, not even my family, but if you've been my friend since forever, you knew a company, all of this, it's actually quite funny and it makes sense. Like if you had told me a couple of years ago that I'll be a yoga teacher, I wouldn't believe it. But there is a lot of things that's life, but there's a lot of things that make sense in the journey and how I got here. And I guess
because and that was interesting, and that's why I put the word energy, because even before the whole yoga thing, you were already talking about energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always talked about energy, and since I'm, I don't know, a teenager or even younger, but I don't remember. My friends always used to joke there was times, or it's like, oh, Joana philosophies. Oh, Joana now is gonna share. Like I've always had this spiritual approach to things. And spiritual not meaning religion, spiritual meaning conscious and reflecting about things and, wanting to bring a little bit more depth and meaning to what we were doing and what we were saying. So that's funny that it was not yoga, but in a sense it was. But I guess the two main drives that it doesn't matter if I wanted to be a CEO of Coke or if I want to be a CEO of my life and have my yoga project, is that I am someone of action. I'm driven and I want to live my life. And I am open to change. And I guess when you are young and when you are 18 or even younger, or you are in your early 20s, you have no idea what you want to do or you want to be. And there are so many options. And you are actually very good at many things. Yeah. It's not like I'm terrible at drawing and anything related to arts, but I've always been a very good student. And even like things that are so difficult for me nowadays, like in finance and strategy and statistics, all of these things. I used to give like extra classes of, I don't even know how to say this, métodos quantitativos, but like things that are so different than my day-to-day life. But that drive of action, of ambition, with the actual true meaning of the word, if we don't connect it with the definition of success being money, reputation, where you live, the house, whatever. If it's like a sense of fulfillment, I've always had it, and it's transversal since all my story.
So ambition as a sense of fulfillment.
A sense of fulfillment and of not waiting for things to happen, in a sense of like, if I want to do something or if I want to discover if that makes sense for me, I'm going to go and try it out. And in that sense, I'm quite courageous because especially professionally, I've always had this thing that I'm going to try. The worst that can happen, it doesn't work. I want to come back. Like, it's funny. I don't know if you know this. I got the job to US and it took me 1.5 years to get the visa to move to Chicago. So during that 1.5 years, I was in Madrid. Yeah. I was traveling to Chicago because my team was there, and I was traveling all over because it was global marketing. I didn't work for US, but I had a little bit of everything. And when the visa arrived, I didn't want to go. Yeah. I had actually the perfect life. I lived in Spain, which is different from Portugal and sexy, but still close. I was traveling, which was the main thing I wanted to do. And I was still in contact with the US reality. So when the visa came, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. And also I had experiences of winter in Chicago, staying there for periods of time. And it was like, oh, this is not me.
Yeah.
So a part of me was like, okay, I don't want to go. But then there's always this thing. Okay, you have an opportunity to go now. What do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Why don't you want to go? Like, what is here? No, I mean, I've always wanted to go. There are some people that don't think about US, or there are some people that don't. I had that. I had it because of the movies and because of the series. I had it because as a good student, as someone who wanted to excel, and that was the other thing I wanted to say. So is the ambition, and also this will to grow, to learn more about myself, and this curiosity that I have. And that can be channeled to different things.
Yeah.
But if you see, it's always about me.
Yeah.
Professionally, working in a team, it can be more content-wise, it can be more spiritual-wise, but I've always had that. That's something that it's been very present. And I think...
And you were working in nutrition at the time. Do you remember that being a conscious choice, the aspect of the service, or it was random?
Not at all. It was random, and it was still a pharmaceutical company. It was nutrition department. I remember that when I heard it was nutrition, a part of me was like, oh, that's cool, because I've always been very much into sports, and I was already like a healthy, conscious eater. I was not vegetarian or anything like that, but I had this conscious about food. So there was a part of like nutrition being sexy, and not like pharma. But that's actually that misconception was destructive very easily, because it was still a pharma culture, and that was a big shock for me. What I had there that I really enjoyed was the opportunity to work in a field that is connected a lot with doctors and pediatricians and nutritionists. And I had like 0.5% of my time was dedicated to programs where I would travel all over the world with doctors to talk about nutrition in kids. And that was amazing. And I always had this fascination for medicine. Not like seeing myself as a doctor because of the very basic things of like, I don't like to see blood and all of these things, but the big service and that's, and I always met a lot of amazing people there, and I liked it. And then the other part was always thinking about education and things about kids, because it was a supplement for kids. So the topic itself was very cool. Like in my team, there was other people talking about diabetes, so not relatable with me, and it was about adult nutrition, like supplements for sports, which is also not related to me. So from the products that we have, coincidentally or not, there was a lot of things that were made the content of the job cool. And then, I mean, of course, I was 21, 22, 23. There was like amazing things happened.
3 years?
Yeah, amazing things happened that is everyone's dream. Like I was traveling first class. I mean, I'm still a human being. I was traveling first class. I was going to these hotels, which I don't know if you know, I think so, but I wanted to do hotel management. So it's like, I've never studied tourism. I have never been in, but it's something that comes up in my life. So I was in all these, like Hilton, Sheraton, all these big chains, and I was staying in all of these hotels. I was meeting people from all over the world. So there was all these things that were coming up that were complementing and were giving me world and opportunities to grow and to learn that were much more than the job. And I think that was what made me stay 3 years, which I know for a lot of people is not a lot. But when you live intentionally, 3 years is a lot. I remember talking with my mom like 3 or 4 months in the job, super stressed and super anxious. And she was like, oh, Joana, if it's like this, then you should think if it makes sense, if it's like you should quit or not. So there was always challenge.
If it's like this, in what way?
If it makes you feel like this, if you are so anxious already and it's like 3 months in, maybe you should think because sometimes it was a lot of responsibility.
Okay.
And I guess...
What
even
was
if
the pressure?
The pressure, the expectations, because it's like, because of my attitude and the fact that this is ridiculous, but it is true, that I'm tall and it's like,
that you're tall.
Yeah, it's funny, you know. I someone told me this once, and I never thought about it. It's like there's a presence when I come in that people forget that I'm 21 or 22.
Yeah.
So they never, unless I ask, they never assume I didn't know it was the first time I was doing.
Yeah.
And maybe I have difficulties also in asking for help, but I was easily, and I have a lot of initiative, so I was
it's not
easily...
only that you're tall and you
And I
look
speak.
more mature than...
Yeah.
Not to say that now you look old.
No.
I
But
know.
yes.
It's the idea of the maturity, that you don't look your age, you don't feel your age.
Yes, I guess that's a better way of putting it. But that happened a lot. And because of this confidence that I also have, not even 6 months in, my boss asked me to go to an event alone. And I had to organize the entire event for everyone alone. So all these things that come up that I loved and I learned a lot, but of course it was scary and I don't know, it's funny.
And you say that it was scary, and you also say that you're confident. And of course, but was it you were anxious about the thing working out well, like the event working out well, or it was the self-doubt? Because you don't seem to talk about it. Like the self-doubt, it was more like the pressure.
It was a pressure.
Or it was the what people thought if you were going to deliver with the expectation they had of you.
I think you always have that, the second part. But I think, I'll be honest, the almost entire journey there, it was everything so surreal that I never felt this thing of like, it was scary, or it's something that I can see from now, like from outside. Over there, it was just something I was doing.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It was, okay, I'm there. I'm organizing. I'm doing. And so I never felt scared at the moment. I felt anxious because I had the pressure.
And you were conscious that you were anxious?
Good question. I don't remember saying like, we didn't even have that vocabulary, Like I don't remember saying like, I'm anxious or I'm... it's funny, I never thought about it, but yeah, I didn't have that vocabulary. Maybe I had some like physical symptoms or things that came up, like my belly was hurting, or like maybe I called someone. I remember once or twice calling a friend or my mom, sharing about something. But yeah, I don't think... I guess sometimes when you don't also know the impact that you are having, it's easier... I never felt that it was more than what I could handle over there, And I never really understood until people... I remember being sitting with the doctors, but that's also something I have that I thank my parents, because I think it comes from education, but I value everyone the same.
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm talking to a housekeeper that's cleaning a meeting room, or a doctor that is a PhD, blah, 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 I'm going to respect them. And I'm curious in both of their stories. Yeah. So only when I was sitting with these doctors in these round tables, and you know me, so I'm talking and I'm asking questions, and they're like, oh, but you are 21 and you are here alone. Only like those were some moments where it became a little bit real. But the rest, I think I was just living and flowing, Only when it became to be... painful to be there, only when like my director was fired, there's a new leadership coming in, only when it became too corporate and too real in my face, that was like, okay. There was a lot of it that was, I don't want to say fairy tale, but it was like too good to be true,
Yeah.
And I think only actually when I started doing the TED Talk and I had to reflect about all of this, did I realize that I probably had a lot of feelings and a lot of pressure and all these things. I think back then it wasn't I don't know. It's funny. I think it was just I was living. I was excited. I was young, maybe a little bit immature in some things, and it worked out pretty well. I think the fact that I was not putting that pressure and I remember being in meetings and asking questions that nowadays I would have probably thought twice. Does it make sense? It's this thing of becoming sometimes too grown up, and everything becoming too serious. I think I was more, I don't know what's the word.
There's this term in the book that I love, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott that she talks about sophisticated innocence.
Oh.
And I think it's the innocence of the childlike, but as you grow, making it a little bit more sophisticated, but not losing the innocence, you know, of that curiosity that is very raw.
And I think that it's not very common, and especially in a US setting where, I don't know, I worked with a lot of international people, but in US, in the corporate office, it's very much US based. And I think they are very much by the book and function based. Yeah. So I don't know, I think they valued it, and it kind of shaked a little bit things, you know? So, yeah.
Okay, and then it's fun also, and the funny thing about the digital records is that you get to also have these glimpses of you or that moment of your life and how you were thinking, you know, and it's funny to rewatch some of the things that you were talking about, knowing then what happened after that, you know?
Yeah.
So what I'm curious, and you know, there's some people that go like 6 months and they have the time of their lives and then they move on to the next thing. But for you, it was a couple of years. So I'm curious about, you know, and I explore in this podcast this idea of waking up moments, because I think that sometimes they happen, you know, from one day to the other, and there are others that happen more gradually. So I'm curious for you, you know, you seem to be in that moment of your life, you felt that you weren't feeling good there anymore, but it seemed like you were in this space of the not knowing for a while. And yeah, tell me, how would you begin talking about that?
Yeah. So in terms of...
And also I cannot imagine me now, you know, because the expectations and the projections of people of where we live. So I'm very curious about all of that as well.
I think the leaving the corporate world and quitting the job in US, it took me time. It took me more than 6 months to really make that decision.
Okay, because then you had your visa and then you went?
And then I went. And then I wanted to stay at least for a year. But a couple months in, I was already thinking about it. And I had all these options. Like, I'm already in US, okay, then let's probably do an MBA, like all of these things. But I always had the drive, and I have always wanted, since I'm, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13, to go to Africa. So the next step of going to Africa to volunteer, it was something I always wanted. And it was not, it didn't immediately came up. It was just that the idea of coming back to Portugal without anything was very scary. So I was like,
anything
after. So it's like, I'm quitting, and then what? So I think I was thinking, for me, the quitting was clearer than what was coming next, which I think most of the times it's like this. And then I was like, okay, I have all these possibilities. And then there's these things that happen. The nanny of my director is Portuguese. She quits the job. She goes to Africa. She has a project. I was friends with her. I'm following the project. So, you know, it's like these things that happen a lot in my life where, I'm going to go there. And it makes sense. But there was a journey behind it. Yeah. You know, it's like, okay, I've always wanted to go to Africa. I was quitting. I came from a very like demanding, competitive, corporate, and a lot of pressure type of environment. And Africa was the opposite. Yeah. And I used to say, like, I was always using the car, and then I was going to go to a slum. But I felt it. It felt right. And when I called her and I asked her, the way she reacted, if I needed any more confirmation or validation, was like, come now. I need you. And like, what is the best thing we can hear? No, you're needed. So it's like, okay, I wanted to be useful as well. I wanted to do something that was useful. So it made sense. And then the traveling is very funny. This is always something that people talk about, because I never planned on traveling 3 years. And most people, when they decided to take a leave of absence or to travel, is like, there's a plan. Okay, I'm going to go 6 months. I'm going to go a year. I'm going to go 1 month. I've never planned on that. It was like, okay, I came back from Africa. I loved the experience there, but it was way too intense. And we could have an entire podcast about Africa. But I realized that I was not supposed to stay there longer. I traveled a little bit for work, but when you travel for work, you're going to hotels, and your time is very limited.
You traveled for work because then
it was global marketing, so I
were
used
still before.
While I was working, I traveled a lot with work. In a lot of countries in Asia, in South America. So it's like I was doing something that I love, but it was still for work.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. And I've made all these friends. So actually, I could go and travel, which is something that I like, but freely. Like I put a backpack and I go. And I am the type of person that is like that. Like I go, I say yes. Like the adventure is something that excites me and fuels me. So I decided, okay, I want to go. And I earned a lot of good money, and I didn't have the time, or it's not really me, to spend it in things. The way I spend money, even in today's late day-to-day life, it's like, it used to be always traveling and food, and now it's like traveling, food, and like books, courses, and things like that. But I'm a little bit more intentional in that sense. But it was always like this. So I saved a lot of money. So I had the freedom of really doing what I wanted. And I never really thought, I want to say this, but it's like I was always very organized. Like I had this app where I had my expenses, I was always more or less managing conscious. And I stayed with a lot of friends. Like I was not always staying in hostels like this. All these things that happened while I was traveling. But it became a thing that was with flow. Like I had a very good friend reaching out saying she wanted to join me for the beginning of the trip, and I traveled with her. Then I met people while traveling, and I traveled with them. Then my sister and her husband, then boyfriend, came and visit me. So it was always something that was flowing. And then my grandmother was turning 80. So I wanted to come back for her birthday. So that was the only date that I had. And I came for her birthday. And this was, I guess, 1 year of traveling, a little bit more if you count with Africa, a year and a half. And there was like a part of me wanted to stop, was tired of moving around, of changing, of not having like a base. But when you stop and when your life is so different, your routine, the way you're thinking, I was like, okay, I'm still in that space, in this space. If I start investing on finding another job, another area, it will be difficult it's different. So I was like, okay, maybe there's something more that I still want to explore. And while I was traveling, I heard about Australia. I heard about this visa that you can apply until you are 30. And Australia, I love beach. And Australia has that, but I've always been very much into underdeveloped countries.
You can apply, and how does it work, that visa?
It's a very cool visa. It's super recent for Portuguese, a couple of years, but it's all over Europe, and it's very common. Basically, from 18 to 30 years, you can go for 1 year to Australia. It's a work and holiday visa. You can work maximum 6 months per job, and you can travel. And I guess what are the cool things? Australia is super expensive, so you earn in Australian dollars, and you have jobs that are already assigned for that. They are already used to, for many years, to have foreign people working, mostly hospitality, hotels, restaurants, but other things as well. And there's a chance for you to travel. I met a lot of people when I was in Asia and South America that had done that. They didn't have a US pocket money. They went to Australia, they worked there, they saved, and then they went to travel with that money. So I heard a lot about Australia. And then it was kind of like, okay, I'm already in this mode. I have this opportunity. Maybe I should just go. And then I applied, and I didn't got in because we have, I think it's 200 spots, and I didn't got in. And I was a little bit, I was a little bit relieved, and I felt like, okay, maybe it was not the timing. But that thing stayed, So I ended up staying here for a couple of months, and I worked in a very cool project in tourism. And then when the application reopened in July, I applied again and I entered and I decided to go. And I mean, I can talk a lot about Australia, but basically the fun thing about Australia was that I went there. I decided to do 3 months in farm work, because this year can be extended for 2 if you work 3 months in a farm.
Okay.
Australia has many farms and no one is working there anymore. So they created this policy, it's smart, the government, where these foreigners can work for 3 months there and they extend automatically the visa for 2 years. And I did it because I was like, my life has changed so much because of visa. I'm just going to go there, do the 3 months, and then I have 2 years. And I did it and got 2 years. And in 3 months after, I decided to come back. But
3 months after you were there, you decided to come back?
I was 6 months there. So 3 months in the farm and 3 months after.
Okay.
And I decided to come back. But yeah, so it ended up being 3 years, 3 years and a half, with a little bit time here in Portugal. But it was never planned. It was never something. And honestly, maybe it's a little bit stupid, but I never even realized it was that much time.
Yeah.
Only after, when I started talking about these things, I realized that it was 3 years and a half.
Okay.
But it was the best MBA of my life. And a lot of who I am today comes from that.
Okay. And then where does yoga come in?
Yeah. So it was not always easy. I know I didn't talk about optimistic.
Yeah, but I was just thinking that in the second, but I think it's in the background of everything.
It is. But I think if you listen to me, you can get it just from my energy. But I used to use a lot the word optimistic. I now use more positive. But it was not always everything perfect.
Yeah.
And being positive or optimistic doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean that. I really like reality. But my approach to life is very much like that. And when I was traveling, and especially in Australia at the end, it got to a point where I was exhausted of talking about myself, of telling my story, of saying where I was from, where was I before, what was I going to do. The type of conversation that excited me at the beginning was not enough.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about depth, people's problems, people's lives, like what we normally talk in our day-to-day lives. And I missed having a home, not in the sense of a building, in the sense of a feeling, like more of a community type of thing. So I missed the fact that specific things like not having a kitchen where I can save my food and cook, but also having like last minute plans, or I miss that feeling of adding value to something, of being part of something, not always moving around. And while I was traveling, I was always fascinated by people that were long travelers, that were more than 5 or 6 years. And I always felt that they were very lonely.
Yeah.
So a part of me, because I also have this background with family and I love people and I have lots of friends, good friends, I felt that I was afraid of that loneliness.
Yeah.
So it came probably with time, but with my process was like I was feeling, okay, this is not what I want to, where I want to be. And I mean, I realized this in probably one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, in Byron Bay. I was living in a cottage by the beach, drinking juices every day, going to yoga classes every day. Like I had probably the definition of a perfect life. And that's when you realize that no, it's not that, and it's not really just the outside. So I started doing a lot of reflections. And I remember, because the Byron Bay area where I was, there was a lot of health and conscious places. I was walking by and I saw this yoga studio. I had tried it before in Thailand, and I think I was open to try yoga while traveling because I didn't put a lot of expectations.
Yeah.
And I think here in Porto, it didn't came up because of that. I thought maybe it was boring or tiring or not for me. Over there was just another experience. I know it's a little bit stupid, but when you are abroad, it feels like there's some excitement in everything being new, and you are also less judgmental.
Yeah.
And I went and I walked to the studio, and they had like a promotion for a month of doing yoga. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I also needed something to do, this energy. And this, I was still that same person. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. And it was amazing. And above all, I stayed connected with like breath and meditation and calming my mind, because this energy goes a lot into the mind as well. So I have a very active mind, and that becomes quite anxious. I have a tendency to project a lot and to think about the future and expectations. So I was starting to feel that connection and having those tools that I had never had before. And when I decided to come back to Portugal, I had no idea what I was going to do. And that was probably one of the toughest, like, if you ask me about toughest moments in my life, I think one of the toughest moments was while I was in the farm work, 3 months in the middle of nowhere. I was like, there was nothing around me. And after a month of picking and packing fruits and vegetables, it's super cool. You're focused on physical work and not intellectual work, but you want to improve. You want to do things differently, and no one cares. And it's like you want to go out and there's nothing. Like we had internet, so I devoured all types of series and documentaries and all of that. But I was a lot in my mind, and I think it was a time where I stopped and I started reflecting and thinking about all of the years before, and a lot of things came up, and your mind can be your best friend and your worst enemy. So I was in a lot of mental patterns, and thank God I don't have that in me, like the depression gene or whatever you want to say it. But I was very, very sad. And I think above all, I was feeling useful. I was feeling like, what the hell am I doing here? Like,
you were feeling not useful.
I was feeling not useful. I was feeling unuseful. I was feeling like, what am I doing here? Like, what a waste. And that got me really demotivated. And because I have this very active mind, and I didn't have the tools back then, I'm very positive, but my mind can get into dark places, as any of us. But like, so I went into a dark place, and I think coming up...
A dark place?
Negativity, guilt. Like, I started second guessing every decision that I made. I even second guessed traveling.
Guilt about what?
About being away, about being spoiled, about a lot of things from Africa came as well. Like, all of these patterns that I have, and I didn't have help. It was not like I was speaking with someone. It was very much on me. I journaled a little bit, but when you're not, so it was not a depression, but it was a little bit close. So if you're not aware of what is happening and you don't have any help from outside, it doesn't have to be a professional help, even friends or anything like that. It becomes a repetitive narrative. So
do you think that anything productive came out of that confrontation with that darkness?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I just want to say this. It was the only time in my life that happened. I had a table. I don't know if table is the word. In a piece of paper behind my wall, where I counted the days before I leave, like prison. I almost felt like I was in prison. Maybe it was a prison in my mind, not really like space, because I had free space, and it's like I'm very athletic. I love running. I never ran there. Or yoga I've done, but I never did anything like that. It's like a part of me was blocked, and I was counting the days like to leave, and I could always leave, but like it's these things that maybe I was like, quitting is
it's for quitters.
It's not
and I'm not a quitter.
Exactly, it's not acceptable. And can you repeat the question?
The question is that I have a question at the tip of my tongue. I'm gonna save it for a little bit later, and we see if we go there. The question was: do you think that something useful and productive came out of that confrontation with the darkness?
I think a lot of...
Because let me introduce the other thing, and you're free to... But one of the things that I think we have in common is our background. Actually, our parents know each other.
I think they studied together.
They studied together. And when I was going through your TED Talk, I looked at some of the comments that were there, and I was not shocked because I've seen comments like that pointing the finger because they make an assumption, which is probably right in a way, in the sense that you come from, and we come from, a privileged background, but making the assumption that whatever you went through was sponsored by someone and just pointing the finger at how spoiled you are. And it's there is an aspect of like acknowledging your privilege, but then there's also this question of what do you do with it? Because you staying in the guilt is not productive. So it is a theme, but it's not only in the traveling, it's also like in the professional choices that you do, how you face life, the freedom that you have, the trust that you have. And in your case, I think you've also, had experiences that you were making a lot of money, that you were fully independent, and times that perhaps you were not making that much money at all because you were starting something new. So I'm just, curious, you can talk about the darkness in that time, but just in general, because, I can imagine that it was probably a process to even understand, okay, what do I want my life to be about? Because in a way you're traveling this less traveled road in the city, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a couple of years ago, if I had saw that comment, I would have been very upset. And nowadays, it was kind of natural. It was a big process for me. And I think above all was accepting and being thankful that I come from a privileged background. So I refused that for many years. Refused accepting that. I actually made my life difficult a lot of times. I started working when I was 16. I didn't go out for maybe 2 years because I was working every weekend because I wanted to have my money to do my things, to travel. I never wanted people to say that I was doing an interrail because my parents paid for it or anything like that. But certain things and certain choices that I make nowadays, for example, I'm starting a new project with yoga, and yoga, it's something that can work very well, but I also want to do it in a way where it's affordable. Asking for help or knowing that I can make certain decisions that are risky, but I have the comfort that if I need, my parents can help me. That safety net makes me realize that I have to do more. So I think I changed from, and I also have people that I know that come from same backgrounds or even better, which, I mean, it's not really better, but they are more privileged and they do nothing. So it was two things. Was one, accepting that. And nowadays that I'm so much connected, I know that I came in this family for a reason. So that also gives me power. And I accept it. I'm thankful for it every single day. And I know that I have to do more.
The responsibility.
I know that I have to do more. And I say this recently, which is like, I have all the decisions that I'm making now in this project. I don't have savings nowadays. And I'm trying to do this project. And I'm starting something new, knowing that if everything goes wrong, I can close everything. And if I need, I have some help for the time that I need. But I also know that if I didn't have this, then I wouldn't be starting this project. This wouldn't be a thing. And I'll be working in other ways and I'll be doing other things. And I know I have that in me. I know I have those skills, that resilience. Like if I have to go and clean floors, if I have to, which I've done actually, but if I have to do all of these things, like I will do it. So it's not like I have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I think when I changed that shift, it was like, no, if I have to do it, I will do it. Like, and if people cannot take certain risks in terms of professional and changes, then it's not even a discussion. They are supposed to come here and do other things, and yoga gave me a lot this sense of purpose and this sense of, okay, we come with this support and this background for a certain reason. Other people come with other things. And I trust that journey to be my own. And that helped me a lot to process a lot of things with Africa. When I came back from Africa, and this might be very spoiled, but it's true, I didn't want to have Christmas presents. I remember crying with 25 or 24 years old when my parents gave me a Christmas present, not a birthday, Christmas present. I didn't want it because I'd seen completely different poverty. But I started to believe that, and it's not just karma, and I don't have to go into past lives, but it's like I came here, I need to focus on myself.
Yeah.
And this thing of changing the world, like I need to focus on myself. And when I change myself and I change my world, a lot of things change around me, and that's enough. And once I started realizing that, it became easier. Yeah, I don't know. I've made peace with it, and I think I've realized that it's a process for me, even nowadays. And my mom is a very successful, independent woman that raised 3 daughters to be the same. So I also have a lot of good and sometimes difficult things about that type of education. So this thing of being independent and self-sufficient is something that is very high on my priority. So asking for help, it's difficult and it's strange, but it allows me to do other things and to have other type of impact. And traveling, I made peace with traveling and realizing that I worked for it.
Yeah.
I made choice for it. I also didn't leave other things because I was there. It was not always perfect. And it was my investment, like those years and that time, it's part of who I am. And this person that is available to help and do all of these things, it's also because of that. So I think it made sense. And coming back to dark times, just because I know you like to talk about not the dark times. I mean, light comes from dark, but no. Just because I think you like a lot the topic of mental health. I think one of the biggest things of my time in the farm was understanding more depression and understanding when people go to places that even suicide is an option. So I don't want to say I thought about suicide, but it was almost there. There was this feeling of really, when you're not feeling useful and you're not connected.
What's the point?
And you are not feeling loved. There's a point there. And I had everything in theory or whatever. So before I maybe was a little bit judgmental about it, and I didn't really understand. And if you see like mental health problems come most of the times where with privileged backgrounds, developed countries and all of these things. So I was like, why? But it gave me much more compassion and understanding of it. And it's funny because when I came back, there were a lot of suicides, a lot of situations around here about it. And my approach was super different. So it really helped me in that. And it really gave me time. When do you have 3 months with that type of time? Because when you're traveling, you're moving, you're meeting other people. There I was like living, in a very simple place, very basic. So it gave me time to contact some of my darkest places. And I think it was the window for yoga. And it was the window, realizing that my mind could go those places, made me want to find tools to help that, because I knew that was not something. It's there. It could always come up, and I think the process that I've done with yoga. So after Australia, coming back to Portugal, having no idea what I was gonna do, but knowing that whatever I would do, I had to practice yoga. That was the first thing I did. Like even before I started doing courses and finding what was the next thing, I found a studio. And I started practicing there every day. After 6 months, they invited me to do a course to become a teacher. And I thought, I'm not going to be a teacher. And don't do it for yourself. You're curious. You see the impact it has on you. And because it had that impact in me.
Why not?
Why not? And the timing.
No. Why didn't you think that?
That's a big thing as well. Because I had this misconception that to be a yoga teacher, you had to be super fit, super slim, that you are like an Instagrammer. Your connection with the body, with image. And so that was the big one. And then the second,
and it's so fascinating how that's the image that we get when it's not
the opposite.
at all.
And all my teachers are completely the opposite. And then the other thing was, I thought it was not enough because I come from intellectual background. I was always a very good student, even the business background. I thought that being a yoga teacher, it was gymnastics and it was not stimulating. Oh, little did I know. Oh my, I worked so much more. But yeah, that it was not enough. So it took me, so I did the course. I started teaching as like internship, helping here, helping there, then the substitution. So it was something very flowing, never planned, no business plan or anything like that. But it took me more than a year to say out loud that I am a yoga teacher. And it took me, which I actually think it was cool, and it was one of the biggest learnings of yoga, was being patient. And this thing of being someone of action also requires a lot of contemplation. Being someone that is very talkative and very extrovert also requires a lot of moments in silence. And yoga brought a lot the balance. I went through the extremes. So I moved to places where I was like very much in silence, very much away, airplane mode, all of these things. And now I'm like trying to find that balance. I think it makes sense. It's not makes sense. It's common when you're going through changes, big changes. But it took me, so 19, 20, 21. Yeah, more or less, it always feels like it's more than what it is when you say it out loud. But like 2.5 years to decide to do it full time. And see that this was life I wanted to be. And nowadays, like I'm 32 years old, I don't have at all anything figured out, and I'm open to changes. But I've never felt so happy and so fulfilled with my job as I feel today. And it's like we have this pressure and this expectation that you have to find a profession and you need to be able to use it with words. Like there's a word that needs to be, and nowadays it's so difficult. There's so many different things that you do. But it's not like I don't have to be a yoga teacher all my life, but yoga is part of my life and that won't change. And I still have darker moments, or I still have times where I'm sad and I'm dealing a lot with my emotions. But I have these tools and this knowing, I was going to say knowledge, but it's not knowledge. It's like this knowing that everything is going as it has to be. And I see these times as opportunities for growth, and it makes sense after. And I don't know if you can say it was like, I feel that I will never go back to that place that I was there. Like even being sad, even going, there's this light in me. There's like this faith that nothing and no one is gonna destroy. And probably, I mean, I'm 32, so it's like the last 10 years or 11 years, if there's like one thing that I have to point out and probably summarize being courageous, being active, energetic, family, all of these things, is like there's this faith in life. And there's this, it's not really like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? Like those were the worries that I had before. Who I want to be and how I want to live my life, my day-to-day life, and which type of people I want to have around me, how I want to spend my time, and all of these things that come up that may sound super cheesy, but it changed completely the way I see myself, and I saying no when I really mean it, and not doing things just to prove something or because I want to be nice and I want people to like me. And forgive myself and being okay with the fact that I'm not perfect, and that being vulnerable and being authentic and making mistakes is part of it. And loving myself, which was something that I've never really did. So the confidence was something that was natural because of, I think, the intellectual side, the grades, the being the good student, the professional background. But then I was like, I mean, physically wise, I was super insecure. some people
Physically.
yes, some people don't even know this about me. Like I had early anorexia when I was 18. I went through a lot of changes with my body that was really didn't know much how to deal with. Lots of difficulties with the guys and relationships. So I also realized that we are not just one thing. We want to label things and organize things and control things and black and white and but it's not like that. And it's okay if I'm an extrovert that likes silence. It's okay that I dance a lot and sometimes I cannot even listen to music. It's okay that sometimes I have a lot of energy and I'm super available and I just want to be surrounded by a lot of people, and other days I don't. And being okay with change, enjoying change. And this is something funny. I'll share this. When I came back from the big travels, I decided to do a storytelling course because I've always liked talking. I love stories, and I was tired of telling my story. Funny enough, what an irony. So like, okay, I'm going to do a storytelling course. And the first exercise that we did, and I ended up doing this exercise in my classes when I taught storytelling after, was write 3 things that you like about yourself. Let me see if I don't get this wrong. 3 things that you like about the other people that you met. So we were introducing, let me explain this. We're a group of strangers. We introduce and talk about our stories. And then we had to write 3 things we liked about ourselves, 3 things that we liked about the other person.
This is the moment where you listening at home can pause the recording or can pause the podcast to write down the 3 things.
Like you're becoming so serious, like what is she going to say? And then it's 3 things that you would like. I think it was 3 things you liked about yourself, 3 things that you liked about the other person, and 3 things. It's all traits, all traits.
Okay.
And 3 things that you want to. Traits you don't achieve, no trait that you want to gain, to work on. I don't know how
traits you would like to have.
You'd like to have, traits you'd like to have. And then you wrote it, and then you had to see if there was any pattern. And one pattern that came up quite often is like we are much more demanding about ourselves than we are with others. And then quite often we look in others what we would like to have. But this is not the point. The point was that the 3 things that I liked in others and I wanted to have were a lot on being calmer, being more grounded, things that in the past I thought were boring and didn't define me. And it's funny because nowadays I'm still active, I'm still energetic, I'm still talkative, I'm still an extrovert, but I'm also someone grounded, calm. Like nowadays it's normal, but I remember first time people that had met me and said, you are so calm, so peaceful, like I love. And I was like, oh my God, you have no idea. This to say that you can change, like my essence is my essence, but you can change. And I had other teacher telling me this. I'm fire. Okay, you have different elements. I'm fire. There's no doubt about it. This energy comes from that. But the fire can be used and be fueled as fighting or as light. And I guess that was the biggest change. Like if I had to summarize, the biggest change that I've done these many years, it's this fire and this energy that I have, instead of being for fighting and proving myself and having to control and being perfectionist, it became as light, as like, okay, I want to be of service. I need time for myself. I want to be present, not worrying too much about the future, accepting what comes, accepting that I'm perfect. And trusting that every journey and that every part of my life led me to who I am right now and being here today, meeting you, like all of these things that are connected. And that connection is fascinating. And it keeps surprising me every day. And I think the more we leave this monkey mind, the less we control, the more we are true to we are, and we are willing to change and to be open, I think fascinating things happen.
Yeah.
And you change the way you see challenges, and you change the way you see suffering, the way you see fear, the way you see pain. I used to block a lot. I used to avoid dealing with those things, and I thought it was weakness. And I think nowadays it's like the more I accept, the more I feel, and feeling for me a lot of times means like crying and like actually have a physical expression of it. The happier, the
wholer,
the freer I feel.
And what I think is fascinating about life is the journey of discovering the balance between going out there and being active, and what you were talking about in the beginning of that fire of doing the volunteer project, going to all of these places, speaking up about what you believe in, making a plan, and then completely being open to whatever the mystery presents you, any surprise that might appear. It's such a paradox.
It is.
But usually the things that are truest are the things that are...
Yeah, and we are not taught that way. We cannot be, because it's not controllable.
Don't do anything. Just sit passively while also being open.
Yeah, so we are not taught that way. So at times feels strange, or it feels like we are an outsider, or it feels like it's scary, or you don't know the words. I'm a person that processes by speaking. So if you don't have the words or the vocabulary, it can find a little bit frustrating or even suffocating. And I think these days it's easier because we have much more vocabulary, much more information. So even that, like the beginning when you were asking me those questions, I didn't even remember the word anxiety. I don't think I've ever heard about it, you know? So also being a yoga teacher in a setting that we have today, it's very empowering.
In the setting, in what sense?
Where people are much more open to it. Like I am teaching yoga and talking about spirituality in my hometown, 5 minutes away from my parents' house. Like the same. Some of my students are those people that have some of the closed-minded minds. So it's like people are more open. People are also a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they don't really know, or they don't have much to lose, I guess. And I'm still fascinated about the people that come and do yoga classes these days. And
how is that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
About the yoga?
Yeah, and also, so not, yes, the yoga, but about what you're saying of like that the people are coming and you are doing this in your hometown and you're very aware of the bubble that you're in. And do you adapt the language? Do you go more into like what you're transmitting energetically? How do you play with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a tendency to, and this is a good thing about me, but sometimes it's like, I cannot adapt in the sense of, I mean, we all adapt in a way, but it's like, if I'm not true to myself, it hurts. Yeah. And it comes quite quickly. So I don't adapt my language in the sense of, I would have done exactly the same if it was in Porto, if it was in Chicago, or if it was in Nairobi. But you're also not talking about as if you're enlightened and you know, but I was
you're
say,
very you in your
I was going to say, but I think it also comes from my energy and the way I am. And I've learned to love this about me and this paradox that you're saying, these controversies, but it's like, I am very spiritual, but I'm also very practical.
Yeah.
So my classes and my energy, my words are very much aligned with it.
Yeah.
So I feel like my role there is to create opportunities for these people that are open, but either way they wouldn't go, you know? And there is something about the fact that I am from there that gives some security and familiarity,
yeah.
you know. But at the same time, it's something different.
Yeah.
So I know, I feel it because it's the type of people that come. Just so you understand, I have a student now that I met her in a Uber. Okay, she was my Uber driver, and now she's my student. So those things also happen. It's just people from Foz and friends of friends. I also, but that's energy, and I think
energy doesn't know
no, exactly,
the social class
exactly,
or the location.
And I think there's people. Any one of us can be a yoga teacher, and there will always be people coming. You attract each other, and there's always like some type of connection. And I don't know. For example, having my mom as my student, and she's probably the toughest person that I have to deal with in many ways, but also probably the first person I go to. But the other day she was telling me she had a difficult situation at work, and we were talking about, she's like, and you know what? I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from the way you approach life and the type of things that you say. And during the class, she's not my mom. Yeah. I mean, there's a connection, of course, but she's not my mom. Like even the way I approach her and I correct her and I adjust her, she's another person there. And that's that. I think that's rewarding, and you don't have to go anywhere to do something big and help. And I felt like I wanted to say something else about being a yoga teacher there, my project there. But
I have a question. You talk about sports being always a pillar of your life and you being athletic, and you also talk about this more intellectual side of yours, that the active mind, the business backgrounds, the doing things in the world. And this is more particular a question related to how yoga is taught, because I feel so much in the West, it is often focused on the asana. And even if you bring an introduction, conclusion, and even if you're thinking and feeling how it is so much more, people come more often than not to that for that 1 hour that they're going to do something with their bodies. So maybe you're exploring now with different workshops or retreats, but how do you sit with this, and do you feel like you want to talk more and to touch people and to provide that space for dialogue? Do you feel limited in the format that has been prescribed by default because of how things evolved?
Have I told you that I love your questions? So probably I would say this is the thing that I adapt. If I could, I would give meditation classes, period.
Yeah.
So I hear you. What I'm actively doing is I'm creating more opportunities to meditate. And surprisingly enough, I've had students that enroll just for meditation, which didn't happen before. And whenever I do an hour a month of meditation, I have people joining, and I would love to have like a morning, a day. It takes time, but yeah, there's definitely some people that are open to it. And I always have meditation in class, as you know. So I can change the sequence. It can be more power, less power. There's always meditation at the end. There's always at least 5 minutes where we are practicing meditation or breathing and concentration. But I've come to realize that the type of lifestyle that we live, asanas are needed.
Yeah.
That a lot of the work that we need to do to get to meditation comes from unblocking things that come and manifest physically. Trauma, stress, anxiety, things, they manifest in your body physically. So asana is a way not just to help, but also to show.
Yeah.
Like I have students that because of asana, they notice, okay, I have a constantly pain on my shoulders. There's something here.
Yeah.
And then they go to osteopath, they do all of these things, but there's always, if they are open to it as anything, but there's always, okay, there's something stressful here. What has happened in my life recently, So that normally comes in meditation, also comes through asana more and more. So that also gives me a little bit of peace of mind.
Yeah.
And it also comes from my own process, because I started yoga and I was driven to yoga because of meditation and because of the breath. But through asana, through the postures, I learned a lot about myself. A lot of the patterns that I had of this thing of like, I want to do the posture very well. I'm forcing it. These were also mental patterns and things that I did with the asana. They were also things that I did in my life and the choices that I made. And it helped me a lot. And I think this is something super important. I don't talk a lot about this. Maybe in a retreat I will. But as a woman, there's a lot of connection with image and how you see your body.
Yeah.
And we also are not taught this at all. I have a little bit of it because I also love dancing. I don't know how it didn't come up today, but I also love dancing. And I think dancing is probably the easiest connection, or the more efficient for me, with connecting a little bit the more physical and intellectual sides. But the getting to know my body and getting to know my body came with asana. And
Getting to know your body.
getting to know my body, literally. I wasn't a person that didn't look at myself in the mirror.
You were?
I wasn't. I wasn't a person that looked at myself in the mirror. And I'm not saying like you're looking at postures or looking at yourself, but getting to know your body, understanding what because our body is a manifestation of life. A lot of things that we are and do is because of our body, and we become sometimes in yoga, and people like us like to go deep, and we go a lot into the mind, the patterns, but the body is a very powerful tool. And if you are paying attention, it's quite fascinating what comes up. So I got to know my body. And
but you're talking more the utilitarian aspect of what your body is able to do?
Also my feelings, also expressions of feelings. And I practice Ashtanga for 2 years. And Ashtanga is, for those who don't know, a set sequence that you can only advance on the sequence, and even the word advancing is already, you can see it, but like you can only advance in the sequence if you master another word, danger word, the posture. So you start growing on it. And through that, I realized that actually, like, cool things that came up of getting to know my body, I'm much more powerful than what I thought. And the physical surpassing of obstacles, or like, because you are doing a sequence that is always the same, you can compare and you can see how you are improving. And that thing of improving with time, with repetition, physically in the body, it's easier to see and grasp than in other things in life. So it became a reality, and I can do it. And that was very cool. It came also to show me other patterns that I had. The perfectionist, like I wanted to master the posture. And I pushed and I forced, and I got so many injuries during that practice because of that. I didn't understand at times that it was a meditation and movement. I became a competitor with myself. So I had also that. And the controlling, because if you know what's coming after, you are controlling a little bit. So, I think with the body, you can also explore a lot of things. And nowadays I'm not, sorry, let me just say this because I'll forget, but nowadays I'm not demonstrating as much. I'm guiding more with words. So I'm paying much more attention to the students, and I'm adjusting much more. And I mean, between us, touch is a very powerful thing, not just in adjustment, but also in energy. So I'm intentionally using it, but also I can see these patterns, and I can adjust the class and what I say and how I guide it towards that. and especially this last year.
So the process of the students and how they are.
Yeah. And especially this last year, I've realized that even if people come to yoga because they want to move and they want to stretch, all of them, or maybe 99% of them, it's not that they are looking for.
Yeah.
So they come because of that, but as
Consciously.
soon consciously, and because it's what is acceptable for them in their but then it's not for that they come. Like, and it came very clear because I would think about the class, I'll prepare, and then I will start. Even before I starting, I had half of the class laying down, exhausted already before they started. Or I started a powerful class and then they are not breathing, So and even those people that come up like these, because we have all these assumptions, no? These girls, or these not girls, these women. I have a lot of women from early 40s to like late 40s, all dressed up, normally elegant or thin, and they come with this energy of, I'm going to the gym, okay? And I'm going to the gym, and they have all this and I love this powerful energy, don't get me wrong, I love this, and active and smiley. And as soon as they start, they are closing their eyes, they are breathing. And when I do a class that is more relaxing, they come at the end and it's like, I love today's class. Can I come meditate tomorrow? And I'm like, okay. Don't assume that you have to do something very challenging and doing all of these things, because that's not what they have. And some of them go to the gym as well and do other sports, but it's like, there's another. So stay true to what you believe and pay attention, because it's actually what they need as well. And I see this more and more. Or I'm like doing a class and I'm going in a rhythm and I see that people are going slower. Okay. And I adapt, and and even my practice is reflecting a lot of that. Like, I'm doing a lot of slow yoga. This active person that runs marathons and did Ashtanga. Like, I'm doing a lot of slow yoga, and I've introduced a restorative practice. Yeah, so that has also changed for me.
Yeah.
This concept of asana and the connection with the body and the patterns that are associated with the body. Like, I go to these retreats, you know about them, Vipassana retreats of 10 days in silence, where like, you cannot do anything else besides meditating.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to read, to write, to do any type of movement, to talk with people. And the idea is for you to be really focused on yourself and not at other people, what they're thinking about or worrying about influence. And it's 10 days. And when you're sitting for a day, for 8 hours or 9 hours, even before you get to the mind, it's the body that really is in pain. And a lot of the approach there, and these 10 days of no asana, so it's not a yoga asana thing, a lot of approach there is to deal with that sensation in the body. So I think that also gave me some, I don't want to talk a lot about it, because I think Vipassana is something that you learn while there. And if you want to go, I mean, there's something that calls you to go there. And it's so difficult that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. But if someone is asking me for it, I would say, yes, go. But it really helped me also to understand the impact of our lives in our bodies and how it manifests. And if we start paying attention, it's not something frou-frou and something, it's like, it's very basic, very primal. Like, when we were younger and we were nervous before a test, our belly hurt. We had to go to the toilet more. Or when I'm anxious, my breath goes faster. Or when I'm nervous, I shake. Or, all of these things. And because you don't have distractions, you are much more in tune and you're paying attention to that. And I think that also helped me deconstruct some of the assumptions that I had that asana or yoga in the West is not worthy, or we are also adapting. There's a reason from our lifestyle and all these things, but also there's a lot of work that goes from that. And even when I go to India and I'm in contact with the essence of Hatha Yoga, and ridiculous, we do like a practice of an hour with 5 postures, and we stay a lot of rest in the same posture and all these things, but like what comes up from it, it's more or less the same, you know? And I've struggled a lot with it. I've had lots of conversations with my teachers about it, but I feel like today, for who I am as a teacher, the students that I have, the background that I have, it makes sense. And I also wanna be a teacher of people that are in the day-to-day lives, that have families, that have activities, that do sports, that move, that, you know, it's not like we are, and even our bodies, our lifestyle, what we eat, it's all connected, you know?
Yeah, so the last question, it is a question I always like to ask. You know, in this context of the moments of waking up and kind of this idea that sometimes in your life, it's almost as if you wouldn't say at that time that you were sleepwalking your way through life, but then something happens or something awakens in you that it changes your perspective. And it seems that life is about discovering all of these layers inside the layers, inside the layers, you know? So the question is, what are your tools? And now you actually talked a lot about meditation, so you're probably going to mention that. But how do you internally, and this can even be in mindset, how do you make sure you're not, or how do you remind yourself to check if you are living your most waking life?
Yeah. I think some of the things I've already kind of mentioned. So pausing, resting, breathing and meditating are kind of like my things. But like I mentioned, talking with people, like helping me process things really helps. Journaling as well. And when I say resting and pausing, I think it's like creating space. And this can go in many different ways. Maybe there's a place, maybe there's someone, maybe there's something like to do. But for me, it's go to the sea. I tend to go to the water, to go to the beach when I need to have that time to allow things to come up. And also to remove some of the weight. And yeah, I think those are like the biggest tools that I have. Getting to know yourself, having conversations with yourself, being open to what comes up. When I say forgiving yourself or understanding that you make mistakes, I think it creates a little bit clear communication. So it's easier that you are actually listening to your voice and to your intuition, not to other people's projections or expectations. And when that path is clear, when the channel of like listening to yourself is clear, and for me it works a lot through meditation, but for other people can be other ways. When that channel is clear, these changes and these waking up moments, they come up naturally. Or it seems like they come up naturally. There's a lot of work behind it because there's like, okay, understanding what is happening, what am I feeling, why do I want to do this, what makes sense for me next. But to be able to ask these questions and to create space to find those answers, I need to have time and energy to have this conversation and to create this time. And if you're not conscious about it, and if we are not very meaningful in creating these moments, life passes very quickly without any of this happening.
What's that quote that you always tell me about that we...
Yeah.
Because it's related to that, no?
It is. Yeah, it is. Because it's something super, for me, so obvious, but it's subtle. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but it's like, is there anything I can do to make myself enlightened? As little as you can do to make the sun rise in the morning. Then what are the use of the spiritual exercises that you prescribe me? To make sure you're not asleep when the sun begins to rise. So it's subtle, meaning like there's no pill There's no book. There's not really a thing that you there's not like a labeled clear thing to do, but it is really making sure you are aware, you have that time, you are conscious, you are open, you are listening to yourself, you're not denying what's going on, what's happening, why are you feeling like that, and asking those questions. And then help comes, signs come. Yeah.
I want to, take this moment to thank you for coming, and thank you for coming now. When I speak to you and when I relax and when we have these conversations, I feel so much awe. I feel so connected to you. I feel so connected to myself, and I feel so willing to be open that it's really so precious.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, it's mutual. And I enjoyed this much more than I expected. And yeah, the podcast was another example on we cannot control, and if we are true to ourselves and we allow, magical things happen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joana Leite de Castro runs a yoga studio in Porto. You can check the links in the description of this episode to learn more about her work. Waking Youth is an independent podcast and newsletter that you can find more about at wakingyouth.substack.com. Our theme music is composed and produced by Carlos Sierra, who also edits our episodes. And I'm Carlota Guedes. If you liked today's episode, I kindly ask you to share it with someone you think or feel would appreciate listening to it. And last but not least, thank you for being here with us. Ciao!